Are you ready to be shocked by the gruesome hygiene habits of Queen Elizabeth and the royals? In the Middle Ages, the average life expectancy was under 30 years due to poor hygiene, and the royals were no exception. Queen Elizabeth I, King James I, and Henry VII were all guilty of practicing strange hygiene habits, and you won't believe some of the things they did to stay clean. These royals' habits are sure to shock you, so stay tuned to find out more. Let's get started. When it comes to hygiene, royals like Queen Elizabeth I, King Edward IV, and Henry VII have developed a bit of a bad reputation. Because of how bad they had gotten, these monarchs were forced to leave their palaces. Obviously, their standards were much higher than ours are today. In the Middle Ages, when the plague was prevalent and poor hygiene was undoubtedly a factor, the average life expectancy was under 30 years. The monarchs of the past practiced some truly strange hygiene. Europe and its colonies had been the dirtiest and least hygienic places on Earth for several centuries. In addition to peasants, royals avoided using water and kept themselves clean in ways that are now considered disgusting. It is said that Queen Elizabeth I took a bath once per month. From November 17, 1558 until her passing in 1603, Elizabeth I ruled over both England and Ireland. England was the last of the 5 Tudor kings and queens, and she's occasionally referred to as the Virgin Queen. Elizabeth was a successful monarch, but her hygiene standards were poor. According to rumors, Queen Elizabeth I expressed hygiene concerns by saying, "I take a bath once a month, whether I need it or not." In those days, baths were not thought to be necessary or even particularly healthy, as they could allow dangerous miasmas into the pores. Being submerged in hot water was thought to be physically draining and should not be indulged in. In fact, many people consulted their astrologers to determine the best time to take a bath, because doctors eventually began to think that washing was so dangerous. The majority of doctors advised washing with cold water and a rough cloth. One could go as far as to advise against using any water at all. Simply buffing the skin with a dry cloth was sufficient. Elizabeth, however, was more the exception than the rule, because it wasn't customary for royals to take daily baths. Sweet-smelling perfumes were heavily used by Queen Elizabeth. She even had a reputation for having a sensitive nose and would occasionally eject stench-filled individuals from her presence by yelling, "Fa, thigh boots stink." In case something unpleasant smelling was around, she also had a commander she could hold to her nose. Since it was thought that unpleasant odors could spread the disease during the Tudor era, anything or anyone entering the royal prisons had to have a pleasant scent. The Queen loved desserts but hated going to the dentist. Furthermore, dentists were non-existent during the Middle Ages. The American Dental Association's timeline states that you would have to go to a barber who would simply pull your teeth out. Elizabeth lost most of her teeth because they rotted so badly that they turned black and smelled foul. It was nearly impossible for many people to understand her when she spoke. Elizabeth used makeup that contained nasty, dangerous chemicals. Unless you don't care about your face, you would most definitely not want to put it on your face today. The makeup was commonly sourced from Venice and made with vinegar, making women appear incredibly pale. She had a fatal case of smallpox in 1562 when she was 39 years old, which destroyed her face. To cover up the scars, she covered herself in layers and layers of makeup. However, she had no idea that by trying to cover up the damage, she might have lost a few years of her life. Priests used to warn women against wearing makeup because they considered it immodest. However, they found it acceptable for a woman to use makeup to cover up her illness if she was ill and close to death. The first Queen Elizabeth had a particular habit of not washing her face. Instead, as soon as she woke up, she added fresh layers of ceruse lead on top of the older layers. Elizabeth did not use much makeup when she was younger, but she began to use more makeup after her battle with smallpox, which gave her the iconic look we recognize today. As she grew older, Elizabeth struggled with both skin damage and hair loss caused by the Venetian ceruse. She even refused to have a mirror in any of her rooms as she approached death due to severe depression. King James I of Scotland allegedly never took a bath and had lice. Edinburgh was the birthplace of James I in 1566. One of the few kings who were actually able to rule two nations were. He made history as James VI of Scotland from 1567 to 1625, and as King of England from 1603 to 1625. The king reportedly never took a bath and had a strong aversion to water, which contributed to his lack of hygiene. He even went as far as not washing his hands, but of course, at the dinner table, he made only an exception for his fingers. He rubbed their tips with a slightly dampened napkin after eating. In one letter to the king, his lover, the Duke of Buckingham, declared, "So craving your blessing, I kiss your dirty hands." A court lady once claimed that James's use of a counselor's chamber caused her and her friends to become horribly loose-infested. According to historical accounts, his presence caused the rooms where he spent the majority of his time to become infested with lice. King James would not change his clothes for weeks on end. He spent the night in them. People only owned 4 outfits at the time, one for each season of the year. He lacked a manly demeanor, gave little attention to how he looked, appeared to be neglected, spoke without regard for formality, and was said to have salivated a lot. From April 22, 1509 through his death in 1547, Henry VII reigned as King of England. For his tragic 6 marriages, he is best known. King Henry was one of the few royals who, in spite of medical advice, preferred to wash frequently. Thomas Vickery, the royal physician, advised all men in the kingdom to have their battle wounds cleaned with urine during his rule. It was suggested by other medical professionals as a bubonic plague treatment. If someone has been stung by a jellyfish, you may have heard of the old wives' tale of peeing on their leg or foot. Further investigation reveals that this is medically incorrect and only adds insult to injury. Henry would lie in a bed covered in thick furs of various animals. This was done to keep the scurrying vermin from the palace from getting to him while he slept. We're not sure how that one was claimed, but he also had his own personal stool seat, which was essentially a commode for a portable toilet. Still, he was sitting in far more hygienic and superior conditions than the rest of his subjects. According to historians, Henry VIII had a groom of stool whose duties included wiping the king's bottom. Because there was no toilet paper at the time, historians assumed that people used whatever was on hand or pieces of cloth, washing their hands afterward. The king had his own laundresses who used soap to clean his clothes, along with his wife and children. When his clothes would become stained, he would bleach them using urine from the Tudor era. He undoubtedly purchased new ones. However, it is challenging to ascertain how much of his clothing was washed and how frequently. The number of royals and noblemen who perished as a result of the ungodly conditions they were living in is impossible to estimate. Infrastructure didn't advance and hygiene and disease knowledge didn't leave the Middle Ages until the 19th century. And that's all for today. We hope you enjoyed learning about these strange hygiene habits of the royals as we explored the gruesome hygiene habits of the royals, including Queen Elizabeth I, King James I, and Henry VII. Thank you for joining us, and we hope you enjoyed this fascinating and surprising hygiene of Queen Elizabeth and other royals. If so, then like this video and share your thoughts in the comments section below. Also, subscribe to our channel for more fascinating and surprising happenings in our history. See you in our next video.